Some things you can't unsee. Standing at my kitchen window with my right arm in a sling, watching my son hand a set of boat keys to a man he'd known for 4 years. That's one of them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to know who I was before that Thursday in March, because the man who stood at that window is not the same one who walked away from it. I'm 63 years old, 36 years as a licensed HVAC technician in Clarksville, Tennessee, the kind of work that ages your hands faster than your face and leaves you with a body that remembers every crawl space and attic you ever squeezed yourself into. I retired 2 years ago with a decent pension, a modest house on Warfield Boulevard 3 blocks from the Cumberland River, and a 40-acre parcel of land out in Robertson County that my father left me back in 1998. I didn't do much with it. I just kept it because it was his, and that seemed like reason enough. I raised one son in that house. My wife, Doris, and I did it together for 31 years. She is the kind of woman who will tell you the plain truth if you ask her, and sometimes even if you don't. I spent the first few years of our marriage learning to hear that as a gift. Took me longer than it should have. My son is 38 now, sells commercial insurance out of a Nashville office, married a woman named Raina about 4 years back. Her father, Merle, runs a small auto parts supply shop near Ashland City. He's 66 years old and has been talking about retiring for the past 2 of them without quite getting there. The kind of man who defines himself by the work, so stopping it takes some convincing. Last February, I had rotator cuff surgery on my right shoulder. I'd put it off 3 years because I had jobs to finish before I retired, and a surgeon telling you your shoulder is held together, mostly by scar tissue and stubbornness, will either motivate you or depress you. I chose motivated. Once I stopped working, the excuses ran out. Tenova, outpatient procedure, full repair. Surgeon said 4 to 6 months of recovery, physical therapy twice a week starting at the 3-week mark. 2 weeks into recovery, my insurance carrier flagged my PT authorization for a secondary review. They needed additional documentation from my surgeon before approving the sessions. 7 to 10 business days, I was told. My first 4 appointments were already scheduled. The clinic offered to keep them if I paid cash and submitted for reimbursement once the authorization cleared. $80 per session, 4 sessions, $320 total. The money was coming. I'd agreed in late January to sell that Robertson County land to a developer, a subdivision 40 acres at the edge of what used to be nothing and was becoming the edge of something. The sale cleared just over $810,000 after broker fees and taxes, but it was sitting in escrow 22 days from releasing. 3 weeks out. I was not broke. I want to be clear about that because I know how these stories get read. I was asset rich and temporarily cash light, the way anybody can be between a large check clearing and an ordinary Tuesday. My checking account had enough for bills, but I'd put a new water heater, a cracked driveway repair, and an emergency tree removal on my credit card in January, and I was carrying close to my limit on it. Putting another $320 on top of that wasn't something I wanted to do if I had another option. So I called my son. Monday, March 10th, he picked up on the 3rd ring. I said, "Hey, it's me. Quick thing, my PT authorization is held up with the insurance. The clinic needs $320 cash for 4 sessions until it clears, and with the land money 3 weeks out, my cushion is a little thin right now. Any chance you could cover it and I'll pay you back the day the funds hit? Shouldn't be more than 3 weeks? There was a pause, just a beat. Yeah, he said. Man, I really wish I could, Dad, but Raina and I are stretched pretty thin right now. Car payment, her loans reset in April, and we're still dealing with the overage from the bathroom renovation. It's just a bad stretch. A bad stretch. Sure, I said. No problem, I'll figure it out. And here's the part I want you to sit with for a second because it matters later. I wasn't performing patience. I genuinely meant it. Because I had spent 30-some years telling myself that asking twice for anything was pushing, and pushing was the thing I didn't do. It was the habit I'd built so long ago it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like my personality. I figured it out the only way I had available. I canceled 2 of the 4 sessions, kept the first one, paid the $80 cash, went through the full 45 minutes with the therapist, then looked at my account balance and made the calculation that I would do the home exercises she gave me for the next 2 weeks and get the rest once my insurance cleared. Anyone who's had rotator cuff surgery and done home exercises instead of supervised PT can tell you, it is not the same thing. I did them every morning at the kitchen table, my arm going through its slow, grinding range of motion, while Doris watched from across the counter, with an expression she was working hard to keep off her face. Welcome to Dad's Real Revenge. Stay with me on this one. Hit that like button and drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from. I'll be reading every single one. 2 days after my son turned me down for that $320, Doris came into the den while I was resting my shoulder and said a friend from church had seen something on Raina's Facebook page. She said, "Your son bought Merle a retirement gift, a boat." I looked at her. She said, "A Ranger Z521C. With the trailer, there was a bow on it. Raina wrote something about how Colin wanted to make sure Merle's first summer of retirement was everything he deserved." I said, "How much is a Ranger Z521C?" Doris looked at her phone. She said, "Somewhere between $54,000 and $60,000, depending on the package." The room didn't change. The TV was on low. I looked back at it for a moment, and then I looked at my wife and I said nothing because what I was thinking had not yet become something I could say out loud. $320 denied on Monday, somewhere between $54,000 and $60,000 delivered by Thursday, same son, same wallet, same week. I've turned that over in my head more times than I can count, and I keep coming back to the same place. It wasn't that he didn't have the money. It was that spending money on me cost him nothing visible. Spending money on Merle bought him something, a seat at a table, a story his wife could post about, proof in front of her family that he belonged in the room with people who did things like that. I was a private transaction. Merle was a performance. And in my son's accounting, the performance was worth a lot more. That night, after Doris went up to bed, I went into my study and found my old work log, black cover bound, 36 years of job sites and material lists and contractor callbacks. I found the first blank page near the back. I wrote 5 words. March 10. Denied. $320. I clicked the pen shut. I squared the book up with the edge of the desk, the way I always squared up a stack of invoices before tax season. I didn't know what I was going to do with that entry yet. I just knew I wasn't going to let it blur. 11 days passed. Then there was a knock at my front door on a gray Tuesday morning, firm, deliberate, not my son's knock, which is always 2 quick taps and a hand already turning the knob. This was slower, heavier. I opened it and found Merle, alone, his old Carhartt jacket, the brown one. He was holding a manila envelope in both hands. He said, "I'm not going to stay. I need you to have this." He held the envelope out toward me. He said, "Read it before you talk to your son about any of this. I mean that." I said, "Merle, what is this?" He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "I didn't ask for that boat. I want you to know that first. When Raina and Colin showed up with it, I told them it was too much. They wouldn't hear it. But 3 days ago, Raina mentioned, offhand, like it was nothing, that you'd asked Colin for help with your PT bills and he'd said money was too tight. She said it like the story was already finished. I went home that night and I started thinking about the financing papers I'd put my name on, and the numbers didn't sit right. I went looking for the reason." He pushed the envelope into my hand. He said, "I'm sorry this is coming from me and not from him." He turned and walked back down the driveway to his old F-150. Not the new boat, not a new truck, his regular truck with the dented rear quarter panel, and drove away without looking back. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. The first page was a loan summary from a marine financing company. I moved my eyes down the columns. Purchase price, $57,800. Loan term, 120 months. Interest rate, 19.4%. And then I stopped. Because next to the words cosigner on record was a name. Mine. My full name, my home address, the last 4 digits of my social security number, which I had never provided to anyone for this purpose. And at the bottom of the second page, next to the cosigner authorization signature line, was a signature that was almost mine. Close enough to pass through a processor scanning dozens of applications in a day, not close enough to fool the man whose name it was supposed to be. I had not signed that page. I had not given anyone permission to list my name on this loan. I had not agreed to carry liability for $57,800 at 19.4% interest, a number that would follow me to a collections agency if my son ever stopped making payments. I set the papers down, picked them up again, set them down. Doris came downstairs an hour later and found me still at the table, coffee gone cold. She sat across from me without asking. I pushed the papers toward her and watched her face while she read them. The same way I'd watched the weather radar 11 days earlier, looking for the system that would explain what was coming. When she got to the signature page, she pressed her hand flat against her mouth. She sat like that for a long moment. She said, "He forged your name." I said, "Yes." She said, "We have to do something about this." I said, "I know." She looked at me and said my name. Then she stopped. She said, "I knew about the boat. I knew he turned you down for the PT money first. I stayed quiet because I didn't want to make it worse. I told myself maybe I was missing something. I'm sorry." I said, "Your mistake wasn't caring. Your mistake was thinking that quiet was the same as safe. It isn't. It never has been." The land money cleared 4 days later. $814,000 after all deductions, sitting in my account like a completed sentence. I did not tell my son the exact number. He called that week. Same easy tone, asking how the shoulder was coming along, mentioning offhand that now that the land deal had gone through, it might make sense to simplify things. A joint account, maybe? Shared oversight. He said, "You're not getting any younger, Dad, the way people say it when they're trying to sound thoughtful about something that has nothing to do with thoughtfulness." I said, "Good thinking. Come for dinner Sunday, bring Raina. I'll ask Merle to come too." A pause on the line. He said, "Merle?" I said, "Sure, man's practically family at this point." I let him sit with that for 5 days. Sunday came the way Tennessee spring days come. A little cool in the morning, warming up by noon, the dogwoods in the backyard doing their 1 week of showing off. Doris made pot roast and rolls and sweet tea in the good pitcher. She wanted one more normal Sunday, and I let her have it. She'd earned it. My son arrived first. He was in good spirits, wearing the kind of casual clothes that cost more than they look, already talking about a possible promotion before he'd even put his keys down. He was relaxed. A man talks most freely when he believes the room is still his. Raina came in behind him, careful and polite the way she always is around me, complimenting Doris on the smell coming from the kitchen. She sat down at the table and looked once at the empty chair beside her and didn't ask about it. Merle arrived last. He came in quietly, shook my hand without making a production of it, sat at the end of the table, and unfolded his napkin across his lap with the composure of a man who has already done the hardest part and knows the rest is just showing up. We ate. We talked about the weather and the high school baseball team, and whether the road construction on Wilma Rudolph Boulevard would be finished before summer. My son carried most of the conversation, easy and expansive, dropping hints about wanting to help manage things now that Dad's finances had opened up. Doris kept refilling glasses. Merle said very little and ate steadily and watched. When Doris stood to clear the plates, I asked her to leave them and sit back down. Rooms notice things like that, the small shift when a voice changes register. I reached under my chair and set a folder on the table. My attorney in Nashville had helped me put it together the previous Wednesday. Good firm, downtown, the kind of office my son had never once imagined his quiet, retired father would ever need. I said, "Colin, you've been talking about wanting to help me manage things now that the land money has come through. So let me tell you exactly how things are being managed." I opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, I said I set up an irrevocable trust. It's fully funded and executed as of this past Tuesday. You are not listed as a trustee. You are not listed as a beneficiary. Not now and not at any future date, unless the trust is dissolved by court order, which my attorney assures me is not something I need to worry about. My son laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. He said, "Dad, come on, what are you even talking about? You can't just..." I said, "The trust's income is directed to a foundation. It covers physical therapy copays for uninsured and underinsured adults in Clarksville, $80 at a time, mostly." The amount seemed fitting. I set the loan summary in front of him. His eyes moved down the page and stopped at the cosigner line. I said, "You signed my name to a debt I didn't know existed. You used my address as a secondary credit reference. You used identifying information I never gave you permission to use. If you default on that loan, the collections calls come to my house. I never agreed to any of it." He looked at Merle. I watched the look, something in it that had the shape of betrayal, which took some nerve given what was spread across that dinner table. Merle set his fork down. He folded his hands and looked at my son the way a man looks at someone he used to think better of, when the evidence is no longer deniable. He said, "You built something on a lie told about a man who raised you. I didn't ask you to, and I'm not going to pretend I don't know what's in that envelope." Raina had gone very still. She was staring at her husband with an expression I recognized. Not anger yet, but the particular look of someone recalculating a number they thought they already had right. She said, "Colin, you told me your dad offered to contribute to the boat as a surprise for my father. That's what you said, word for word." He didn't answer. She said it again, quieter. He still didn't answer. He didn't have anything for her or for any of us at that table anymore. My son got to his feet, his chair scraped back. He said, "This is insane. Over $320, Dad? You're doing all of this over $320? I said, "Is that what you think this is about?" He said, "What else is there?" I said, "There is a forged signature on a financing document. There is my shoulder spending 2 weeks getting half the treatment it needed because I didn't want to ask you twice. There are 38 years of me handing you the benefit of the doubt when the evidence suggested I should have been looking closer. That's what else there is." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. When you've already done everything, volume is beside the point. I said, I didn't destroy your life, Colin. I just stopped building the floor for you to stand on while you did it yourself. He left before dessert. There was no slam door, no theater. Men who have been genuinely caught don't have the energy left for performance. He walked out the same door he'd walked in through, and the screen door closed behind him, and then it was quiet. Merle stayed. He helped Doris with the kitchen the way people do when they want to be useful and don't have words for the moment. Before he left, he shook my hand in the doorway and said, You did right by yourself tonight. I said, I don't know if it was right, I know it was true. At this point, that's the only distinction I still care about. The bank's fraud division moved on the application within 2 weeks of being notified. The unauthorized cosigner documentation triggered a full audit of the loan. Merle's notarized rejection of the vessel title added another layer of complication to the collateral picture. My son ended up with a loan in dispute and a boat he no longer had sitting in his name. Raina took their daughters to her sister's place in Murfreesboro for a stretch. What happened inside their marriage after that Sunday belongs to them, not to this story. My son came to the door himself about a month later. He was thinner. The watch was gone. He stood on my porch right where Merle had stood with that envelope, and he said, You ruined everything. Over $320, Dad. You ruined my life over $320. I looked at my son. My shoulder was almost fully healed. 8 weeks of proper physical therapy, fully covered once the authorization finally came through. I could lift my right arm over my head without flinching for the first time in 3 years. I said, I didn't ruin anything that wasn't already built fragile. And I love you enough to be honest with you about that even now. He didn't have an answer. He turned and walked back to his car, and I watched him go from the doorway, and then I went back inside. These days I spend most evenings in the garage. Got a '68 Ford Bronco I've been restoring for the better part of 2 years. Nothing I need to finish by any particular date, just something to do with my hands while my hands still work the way I want them to. The shoulder holds up fine now, better than it did before the surgery, honestly, which is what 8 solid weeks of physical therapy will do for you when you actually get all of them. Doris came out last Tuesday evening with coffee, leaned against the workbench the way she has since we were young. We stood there a while without saying anything, which is one of the better things about 31 years with someone. She said, He called again, says he wants to come by and talk, says he's ready to be honest. I set down the socket wrench and thought about that for a real moment. Not a performance of thinking, actually thought about it. I said, He knows where I live. My door is open the day he comes through it with something true. Not an explanation, not a plan. Just the truth and what he's willing to do about it. That takes time. And he knows that too. She nodded. After a while, she went back inside. I looked out the open garage door at the yard going dark at the edges. Clarksville in the fall gets quiet in a way that isn't empty, just settled. Like it's finished asking anything of you for the day and it's willing to just let you be. I picked up the wrench and went back to the Bronco. Some things you can't unsee. But some things, given enough honesty, enough time, and enough willingness to stop carrying what was never yours to carry in the first place, you can build something steadier on top of. Something that holds. That's not revenge. That's just what it finally costs to stop paying for someone else's choices.